Council Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, November 26, 2019 will come to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown is absent at the moment. Ms. Stevens.
Present.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Council President Brady.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Item number 3 on the agenda is public comment. Has anybody signed in?
No, Mr. Chair, no one has signed in, and I'd like to let the record reflect that Mr. Jones is now in attendance at the meeting.
Thank you very much. And next we have 2 matters referred to the committee for discussion. They are closely related, so I'm going to have you read both items into the record, please.
Resolution number 2019-0252, declaring the necessity of submitting to the electors of Cuyahoga County the question of a replacement of 3.9 mils of an existing Health and Human Services levy and an increase of 0.8 mil for the purpose of supplementing general fund appropriations for health and human or social services for a period of 8 years outside the 10 mil limitation in accordance with the provisions of Section 5705.192 of the Ohio Revised Code. And resolution number 2019-0253, determining to proceed with submitting to the electors of Cuyahoga County the question of a replacement of 3.9 mils of an existing Health and Human Services levy and an increase of 0.8 mil for the purpose of supplementing general fund appropriations for health and human or social services for a period of 8 years outside the 10 mil limitation in accordance with the provisions of Section 5705.192 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Thank you very much. Those resolutions are before us, and I'm going to call Health and Human Services Director Walter Parfiowicz to please come forward and make the presentation on behalf of the administration. Good afternoon.
I think your mic's on.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll try again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Council President Brady, Council Vice President Jones, Council Chair Miller, members of council. I'm Walter Parfiowicz from the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm here with Mike Chambers from the Fiscal Office, presenting on this 3.9 replacement and the 0.8 increase. Cuyahoga County currently has 2 Health and Human Services levies, 4.8 mil and 3.9 mil. The 3.9 mil levy is a smaller of the 2 Health and Human Service levies. The current 3.9 mil levy generates $104 million per year. The 3.9 mil levy was last approved in May of 2018. The proposed replacement and increase of the 3.9 mil levy will extend the levy for 8 years with collections starting in January of 2021. Extending the levy for 8 years allows the county to save money on election costs and allows for long-term planning. Levy funding is critical. Overall funding we receive from the federal and state governments is insufficient to meet the needs of our most vulnerable residents. Several of our federal grants we receive, such as child support, child welfare, Medicaid, and SNAP, require a local match. The general fund is insufficient to cover the required local match or many of the other state mandates. The levies fund critical programs and services to ensure children are safe from abuse and neglect, elderly are supported in their homes, health care is accessible, families in poverty are linked to public assistance programs, people with mental illness and addictions receive the services they require. Programs and services funded by the levies include protective services for children and seniors, youth development, early childhood, public assistance, workforce, child support, fatherhood, Healthcare services, including Metro Life, Flight, Trauma, Critical Care in the Burn Unit, alcohol and other drugs, mental health, homeless services, and reentry services. Health and Human Service levies are investments. They're investments that lead to lower costs in the future. Some of our investments include permanent supportive housing, significantly reducing the overall number of chronically homeless. UPK, studies show early education is critical to breaking the cycle of poverty. Say Yes to Education, addressing the needs of CMSD students from the earliest ages through high school and provides college tuition for CMSD graduates. Infant mortality, decreasing the county's infant mortality rate and overall improvement of birth outcomes. Youth Workforce Initiative, internships for young people that result in clear, productive career paths for younger adult residents. Despite our efforts, the need for services exceeds our ability to provide them. Cleveland is the second poorest city in the country, and in Cuyahoga County specifically, poverty is 15% higher than during the Great Recession. Poverty is 34% higher than the national poverty level. 61% of people living in poverty are either old or very young. Residents face significant health challenges. Residents 30 years old and younger are nearly 3 times as likely than the rest of us to be uninsured. Significant portion of our residents still remain hungry. Cuyahoga County has become an unsafe place to be born, particularly to African American babies. The rate of drug-induced deaths is more than twice the national average. In the last 3 years, the number of children in county custody has grown by 63%. 1 out of 7 residents between the ages of 16 and 24 are neither working nor in school. And more of our residents are now over the age of 60 than under the age of 20. The 3.9 mil Health and Human Services levy currently generates approximately $104 million on an annual basis. The replacement of $11 million and the increase of $24 million will generate an additional $35 million in revenue per year. The replacement portion is included in the executive's 2020-2021 recommended budget, and it's included in the 8 divisions of the Department of Health and Human Services, Metro Health, the Adams Board, Juvenile Court, and Public Safety. The proposed uses of the additional revenue include services for infants and children, such as kinship care and UPK, mental health and addiction services, such as behavioral health, diversion, crisis, and residential services, public safety services, such as wellness, reentry assistance program, permanent supportive housing, and our reentry services. And finally, aid to the elderly, such as options, congregate meals, and transportation. The proposed allocation of the $35 million, $5.1 million for the Adams Board to serve those who cannot be served with the opioid settlement funds. This includes areas of crisis and residential assistance. $2 million for Department of Senior and Adult Services to eliminate waiting lists and serve additional seniors through options, providing meals, and hiring additional family service aides, geriatric assessment specialists, and expanding senior transportation. $725,000 for the Family and Children First Council to implement crisis coordination, increase out-of-school time program in additional neighborhoods, and increase our Family and Schools Together, the FAST program. $5 million for Invest in Children to maintain the expansion of our universal pre-kindergarten program and the number of slots available for children. $6 million for the Department of Children and Family Services to implement a kinship care program with extended family members. Kinship care is the most desirable of out-of-home placement options, offering the greatest level of stability, allowing children to maintain their sense of belonging and enhance the child's ability to identify with family culture and traditions. $1 million for the Department of Job and Family Services to hire additional caseworkers to further reduce wait times for those seeking public assistance benefits. $2.5 million for the diversion center to offer mental health screenings, assessments, and rapid referral to divert people from jail and into community-based services. The goal is twofold: treatment for individuals and decrease in jail population and recidivism. $2,175,000 for housing stability services for families, young adults, single adults moving from emergency shelter and homelessness into permanent housing. $250,000 for the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center to restore lost VOCA funding. $250,000 for the Cleveland Adoption Network to restore lost VOCA funding as well. $5 million to HHS agencies for inflation or year-over-year Health and Human Service levy expenses. And $5 million for Health and Human Services expenses currently subsidized by the county's general fund. Of course, all of these are subject to county executive and county council approval. The cost of the replacement and the $8 million increase to an average homeowner is $41.58 per year based on a home value at $100,000. The total cost of the $4.7 million Health and Human Services levy will be $164.50 to the average homeowner, again based on a home valued at $100,000. Cuyahoga County and the Department of Health and Human Services remain accountable. The county has all contracts in a searchable database on the county website. All meetings are streamed and archived on the county website, and the county has both an Inspector General and a Department of Internal Audit. The Department of Health and Human Services has probably the best division for contract administration and performance in the county. We have our own division of performance evaluation and innovation. We monitor all contracts and report on performance outcomes. We are audited by the State Auditor's Office, and our programs are monitored by the federal government each year. As an additional accountability measure, the county will be working with the Center for Community Solutions to create performance measures and baselines to track existing levy dollars, but more importantly, the additional funding the new levy will generate. In summary, the 3.9 mil levy is the smaller of the two. The current levy generates approximately $104 million annually. The proposed levy, if approved by the voters, will generate an additional $35 million annually. If approved, the replacement and the increase will total 4.7 mils and generate $139 million annually. We're requesting County Council place the 3.9 mils replacement and an increase of 0.8 mil to the Health and Human Services levy on the March 17, 2020 primary ballot. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Before I take questions, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process. As you can see here, we have two resolutions, and the first resolution is the declaration of necessity. We have to pass that, and then after that's passed, then the fiscal office has to specify the exact dollar amount that the levy will raise. And then subsequent to that, we then have to pass the second resolution, which actually places the issue on the ballot. The deadline for issues to go on the ballot for the March 17, 2020 primary is December 18th, so we would have to pass this no later than our last council meeting on December 10th. And preferably, the two items are passed sequentially. You pass the first one, and then after that one is done, then the second one can be updated with the numbers and passed separately. Although they have been passed concurrently, it has been done by having the fiscal people ready to act on the first one during the council meeting. But it's not the preferred way to do it. The preferred way is sequentially. So with that having been noted, we're open to any questions or comments by my colleagues. Councilman Shrine.
I see by your math, it looks like it's about a 35% increase.
Correct.
Is that what it is?
I think so,
Why,
yeah.
why don't you don't put that down here, though? You have to actually crunch the math on that.
It's about a $15 increase based on a replacement and 45 with the increase, 0.8 mil.
Okay, so it's, the increase is almost 200% more than just the replacement would be. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it looks as though there's a lot of new programs in there.
Some, yes. A lot of those are existing programs, just
If you had to identify which programs that you had on your list are supported by the replacement versus which ones would be supported by the new increase, could you identify those?
probably not clearly now, but I could do that for you.
Could you get that for me, please?
course.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Further comments, questions? Okay. Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Director P.
Before you start, let me just note that Councilmember Brown has ended the meeting, so we now have all 11 in attendance. Thank you.
My question is on the page where, despite our efforts, the need for services exceeds our ability to provide for them. So you stated in one of your bullets, residents 30 years old and younger are nearly 3 times as likely than the rest of us to be uninsured. I'm just wondering, have we taken that a step further and looked at how many individuals are from the justice system?
We have not.
Okay. Is there a way that we can do that, and that can give us, that can tell the story of why they're uninsured?
I will take a look at that.
Okay, and then maybe if we identify that number, then we can actually put that with the workforce initiatives and see if we can connect the dots.
Okay, I've made a note.
Okay. Council President Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little sort of overview. It's in here, but I think it's worth repeating to understand it and to try to absorb what this means. The data says that the city of Cleveland is the poorest city in the United States. That's what the data says. So you have to live within that context. If you don't understand that you live within the context of a county with tens of thousands of people in poverty, then you're having a different discussion than the one you should be having, in my opinion. It also indicates that the county is not only has a significant level of poverty, but that it's older. Now, the country's getting older, but our county is getting older faster than the country. We know about a lot of the reasons for that, but nevertheless, if you're not having this discussion in the context of a county and a city, a large city with poorer people than most counties, I wish we were more affluent. Who doesn't? But this is where we are, and this is the county that we are the county council for, and part of, we have the responsibility of trying to deliver services and governing in a county which has its issues. We've got a lot going for us here, too. But clearly, what we've got going for us is not going to be able to take care of the gap that we have in terms of people in poverty in this community and people that are older in this community. So I just want to say, keep that in the context of what we're discussing. We're not a middle-class community. We have many people in poverty and many people in the working class that are barely making a living.
I'm going to segue for just a minute on what the council president said and say that there's basically 2 kinds of things that we do with Health and Human Services money. One is to respond to the immediate needs. This is child welfare and senior programming and mental health and addiction services. And the second kind of thing we do are programs designed to act proactively to get in front of things. The programs like Say Yes to Education and early childhood education and closing the achievement gap and the workforce sector initiatives program, and it's these kind of programs that give us the hope that we might not always be the second poorest city in the country. And it's these kind of proactive programs that are always the first to get cut when money is short, because most of the direct services programs are state mandated and we have to provide them. But the other programs are not. And so if we were to do just the renewal or just the renewal and the replacement, we could probably continue to provide most of the direct services programs, but it's the programs that create the hope of a better future that would really be cut and difficult to continue. So that's why we need the replacement and the proposed increase. And Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. I certainly understand the need of Cuyahoga County. Been here 3 years now and have seen where many of our programs help those that are absolutely in need, whether it's food or housing or mental illness. So there's no question there. The only issue that I am concerned about is that, there are other people in this county that aren't in need of these services but are asked to pay for it. And when we're looking at a 200% increase for the 0.8% above the replacement levy, we're talking about, working class families. We're talking about people that have 2 or 3 children that are living in a $150,000, $200,000 house. That $13.58 for the replacement quickly turns into $41.58, maybe times 2, on top of what they're already paying, which in today's dollars, it's about $122, $123. So this is a significant ask. This is not we need to continue and perhaps absorb the increases from the appraisals, but this is a significant ask. And I think what's most concerning to me is that we don't want to lose this ballot initiative. We don't want to ask for so much that people can't afford it. They can't afford it. They're trying to take care of their families. They're not asking for services of our county. They're providing for themselves and their children and putting food on the table and working every day. And I think that the ask of 0.8 mils is a considerable ask above what we would be asking with the replacement levy that already increases what they're already paying. So I just wanted to, make that clear that I certainly understand the services and do support the replacement. We have to continue what we do, but at a price that people can afford. And that's what I'm concerned, for the most part, of asking for the 0.8 mil levy on top of the replacement.
Understood.
I would like to put the proposed increase in another context. If the proposed increase were to go into effect, it would take place starting in the beginning of 2021. The last increase that we did was passed in 2013 and took place at the beginning of 2014. So there's a difference of 7 years. Once the rate is set, it's a fixed dollar revenue source. It doesn't go up from year to year. The total amount provided by the two levies together is approximately $240 million. The $35 million increase is about 15%. So you're talking about a 15% increase over 7 years. That's looking like 2% a year, about the same as inflation. I think it's much more reasonable when viewed in that context. Council President Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add to the narrative that the chairman is laying out, what's also important is that this is for 8 years. When we began, the new government, we had had Health and Human Service levies every 2 years for many, many years. We decided over time to try to move toward a system where we would have these levies only every 8 years. Part of it was so we don't have to run campaigns every 2 years and raise a fortune, to do it. But another very more practical part of it was that there are so many other needs in the community and so many other ballot issues that come up in the community that there has to be some kind of rationale, a rational approach rather, to how we have these levies on the ballot and when. When we did this in 2013, there were 2 other levies on the ballot simultaneously. And it was a different kind of an election. It was an off-year election. It was, but that really brought home the complication of trying to, community this big with so many important and popular needs that make our quality of life, so much better in this community. That we needed some kind of a rational way to go about this. We moved a few years back to our first 8-year levy, and this would be an 8-year levy, and we would be finally, within the first decade of this new government, have moved toward 8-year levies. That also, as the chairman said, has to be taken into consideration in the sense that this increase has to last over a long enough period of time to provide services. So I think that it's the length of the levy that's also something to keep in mind. And the inverse is that if we were to follow the councilwoman's preference, we would have to do no more than a 2-year levy. We couldn't do an 8-year levy. We couldn't even do a 4-year levy because that's when our next levy comes up, is in 4 years, the renewal of the next levy, and it will be a renewal if this increase is successful. So, we're in a position where if we were to take that approach, while yes, it would be in many ways desirable, who wants to raise taxes, it would not get us there, and we'll be sitting here in 2 years facing the very same issues.
Ms. Simon.
Just a question through the chair to the director about, are there any statistics or how much of the levy money actually flows into the city of Cleveland versus the rest of the county?
I'm not aware of any statistics.
Is that something
We could
that
look into
we could
that.
look at to see
Sure.
how much money goes to the city of Cleveland from our levy fund?
Certainly.
And then perhaps, we can gather up from the demo fund and see how much actually goes to the city of Cleveland. We've been really good partners with them. So I'd like to see the numbers.
Councilman Schwab.
One of the alternatives that could be created is picking up on both the council president and Mrs. Baker's would be to separate the two concepts and separate them so that one is the replacement and one is the new addition. And those could be voted on individually by the taxpayers to let them know what they think, whether all these new programs are something that they want to support versus the increase that would take place based on the property valuation, which, as you indicate, I believe is $11 million based on the replacement. This would allow the two to be separated and let the voters decide, let them support one or the other or both. Would that be something that would still tell the same signal as far as to the voters that they would have the opportunity to weigh in on both if there were separate issues?
I suppose those are options, but I think that adds confusion to the voters as well.
In what respect? Is one, I'm asking whether or not there would be a replacement of your existing property values based on the increase. The other is, because you're now going to provide us with which items are supported based on your response to my previous question.
Correct.
And you're going to tell us which items are brand new that are being added as a result. I mean, paying down the debt in there is items that you can probably clearly identify which ones of the remaining portion of the 34 million are considered new. So then the taxpayers would have that choice and say, yes, these are things that we want to support. And I agree that as Mr. Miller points out, some of those perhaps are innovative projects and processes. But we are asking the taxpayers in this particular case to pay over 34% increase in their taxes. Might be amortizing 34% over a period of 8 years, but the numbers, if you divide 8 by 30 by the 34, you're going to find it comes out higher than the numbers which you was just alluded to.
Mr. Chairman.
Council President Brady.
Thank you. Councilman, I think that's a very creative idea that you have there. I have personally never heard of a levy being on a ballot with an alternative levy on the ballot at the same time. And I think it's a little too cute by half to say that if you offer people the opportunity to vote for a levy that costs much less than the levy that costs for much more, that that you're really laying out the problem for them. I don't know who would run one levy and who would run the other levy. Perhaps you and I would be on the radio debating difference for one and for the other. But I think it's really, while I appreciate the creativity, quite impractical, and I've never heard of it ever being done. And I'm certainly not willing to support a levy which doesn't do the job that we need to do.
Well, I guess the job that we're identifying, at least on seeing how we're having a dialogue on this at this point in time, if that's all right with the chairman in regards to it. But what it is the new is a levy that says it's the 0.8. The other is the replacement of the existing.
Yes, it's true. I mean, that's the way it was
characterized. They're standalone opportunities.
It was characterized that way. I know, but in fact, it's also. Are you talking about a 2-year levy, Councilman?
No, you could still be doing for both for 4 years.
No, 4 years. Well, one of them wouldn't be adequate to even get us to 4 years. So how could we do them both for 8 years?
The same way you would be doing it right now. That you're bundling the two together.
We're bundling the two together. Yes, we are, because again, let me just say that it's an interesting concept. I would be interested if you had any evidence that this has ever gone on anywhere in the United States, which has.
We do know that
quite
it's
a
done
tradition.
quite often by school boards that they'll have two levies on simultaneously. One would be for props or for a capital. One would be for an operating. Two different levies, two different opportunities, both of which can be impacted by the operating, and it's done routinely throughout the state of Ohio. You'll have two levies on the ballot at the exact same time, and the voters can decide whether they want to support both or one. And that happens throughout communities all the time.
And the outcome is pretty predictable, isn't it?
No, it's not. I bet you'll find that people will support both of them because there are two different.
So what
One
you
is
would
new and
expect
one-
people to support both of these levies?
That's what I think is being asked by the way it's written. All I'm suggesting is give the voters a choice. Because right now we realize that this is probably going to be taking place, if it goes forward, in a partisan primary. When was the last time we've ever asked for a vote during this tenure of the new county government to do this? The answer is never.
Well, the answer is no. Not entirely straightforward, though, Councilman, because we have had levies on the ballot in primaries before there was a new government. The fact that there's a new government really isn't the issue in terms of this levy. We do this in primaries so that if we fail, we're able to go back in a general and do what has to be done so we don't really wreck the train around here. That's the only reason we do it in primaries. This primary is this primary. And that's, that's the reason it takes place. All primaries are partisan, and we have traditionally always gone to the primary because we want at least the backup chance to go in November if we fail. That's the reason we go in primaries.
I meant to ask for an increase in a primary and to do a replacement in a primary. We haven't done that in the 10 years of this new government.
That's true. We haven't specifically done that.
Yeah.
But in the many years we've been operating, that we've been having levies on the ballot, they have almost always been in primaries, with the exception of 13, when we were going to run out of money even more quickly.
Yeah, they were renewals as opposed to replacements and new.
Well, there weren't all renewals. There were increases.
Well, I'll check the
2013 was an increase.
but that was not in a primary.
It was not.
There were increases in primaries in the first half in the first 20 years of this.
Yeah, 20
Right.
years, yes.
20 years. I don't see what the difference is whether there's 3 commissioners or 11 councilmen when it comes to a levy.
We're going to go to Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Director P. I know my colleague keeps mentioning that these are new proposals, but could you please state what is the only thing that I see that are new proposals in this budget would be the $2.5 million for the diversion center. Everything else has been funded previously, but needs increases because we have vulnerable citizens in our community. If you want to be technical, $500,000 for the rape crisis and the Cleveland Adoption Network is something that we've given money to Cleveland Adoption Network. But for Cleveland Rape Crisis, I guess that would be, could be looked at as a new something that we're funding. And that's, both of them are based on because they lost their gap funding from the state. So this is not something that we plan on continuing to fund, but we wanted to be good partners and be able to help the individuals that were in need. So can you please clarify, those are the only 3 things that you can technically say that are new in this.
I would add the kinship care program through DCFS. Currently, we don't fund a kinship care program. And then also the diversion center, $2.5 million.
I mentioned the
Okay, I'm
diversion.
sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Ms. Simon?
I have a question on some of that opiate money going to diversion. Isn't some of the money, aren't we looking to use some of that money for diversion?
Yes, I believe we are.
And in the exact timing of this resolution, is everything has to be done today?
No, it does not.
Okay.
What we're hoping to do today is to pass the first item, the resolution of necessity, and if it's passed here today, we hopefully will pass it tonight at the council meeting. However, the second measure, which actually places the issue on the ballot, would be held in committee, and there would be a second hearing on Monday, December the 2nd. And then we would act on it at that time. Ms. Baker, followed by Gallagher.
That's right.
That sounds good. Let's have Michael go first. Thank you.
I just had, on the Invest in Children, I seem to recall testimony during the budget that the universal pre-K dollars that the private sector promised did not show up in total. Is that true?
I don't believe that's true.
That's not true?
No.
What monies didn't show up in total?
I believe all the money showed up in total.
Oh, somebody testified that the initial, I'll check that. Thank you.
I can take a note as well and summarize it for you if you'd like.
It might have been Invest in Children or something. It was a substantial shortfall. And I would just, well, wait till we get that.
I think I can clarify that a little bit. at one point there were ambitions expressed about raising a total of $100 million for early childhood education. And that was not accomplished. However, there was not any money that was promised and not delivered. Actually, the initial $10 million from the private sector, some additional money was raised, and we're now up to 12 or 13 million. So the money that was promised was in fact delivered, although there were higher ambitions at one point.
I've just been informed that those higher ambitions were a promise of 100 million, and we got 12. And my concern would be if indeed that's true, and let's find out if that's true, and get the testimony of those that pushed this on us with a $100 million offer, why we would continue down this road if the general public isn't with us, and to expand the program. But let's find out about that 100 million.
Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I think it'd be an understatement to say that we have had a very rocky past year. We have gone through a lot of challenges. We are working through those challenges, but we are certainly not at the end of the road. I question whether at this point we have the credibility to get this passed, and especially not only replacement, but the 0.8 mil increase. I would ask that we at least consider in 2024 that that may be a better time, even though we want to go at that point with a renewal, that may be a better time to ask for an increase, showing that we have managed our dollars wisely, that the opiate money that has come in, which could be as high as $200 million by the time we collect it all, and also just in how we manage what we do in the next year, to prove to those that perhaps are weary of all the press and what we've been having to deal with, that may not check off a yes for this levy because of those things, that perhaps we should be a little more conservative in what we ask for. And then in 2024, after we have had a chance to show that we are in fact in control, spending money wisely, and that those that are in need of the opioid services are getting what they need, then perhaps we would have a reasonable chance in getting an increase at that time. And I would just offer that as a suggestion.
Respectfully, my guiding principles are hope and belief. I would much rather ask for what is really needed and fail than fail right out of the gate because you didn't even ask for what you knew was really needed. Vice President Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And these services are needed. We know these are critical services. This community has been very supportive over the decades for the Health and Human Service levy. And it is an increase, but it is a needed increase. There's inflation involved. There are so many critical services that are needed that I certainly support it. I did have one question about Councilman Schron's idea. If that were to go forward, would you be endorsing a vote for both of your separated items, or would you be endorsing one over the other?
One is I would like to get the data before we go forward with any conversations as to what is new. I've identified it looks like at least $11 million is new of this amount of money, of this 35. So do you think that that's...
My question is for your suggestion. Would you be endorsing your suggestion, or would you endorse one
Would I be putting both,
Item over.
would it be recommending both go on the ballot?
Would you recommend?
That's a different question. So
Question
don't
is-
ask me how I'm going to vote. Ask me what I'm going to do as a
Please
legislative body.
direct the responses through the chair.
Pardon? Oh, thank you. The responses would be that if you put something up there, just like I moved a second position that I don't even necessarily agree to, because I think the dialogue is what's important.
So I didn't ask you for your vote. I asked for your endorsement. What
Would I
you
move to put
endorse?
both on the ballot? Yes.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? If we bifurcate it and let the voters decide, not this body, let the voters decide. And don't forget, we probably have over 500,000 independents that probably won't even be voting at that election, more than likely, because that becomes an issue-only ballot, and we know that a very, very micro portion of people even pull a ballot in an issues-only ballot. So we're talking about less than 25% of those people will probably be voting on this. So I think it's only fair to ask, would you support both the increase amount and the valuation amount on the two? Thank you.
Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to the director, in terms of the two big items that are considered new, the $6 million for the kinship care and the $2.5 million for the diversion center, could you get us some data in terms of, because the way I look at these two programs being initiated is that we're finally trying to take a step in the right direction and bringing costs down. But could you get us some dollar figures in terms of
Absolutely.
the savings that we would have if we actually diverted people with mental health and drugs from our jail? Because we're having this big global conversation about building a new jail. What is the size of that? And, you know, it seems like some people want to keep building bigger and bigger jails when we could actually divert. I don't know the percentages, but the majority of the individuals that are in our jail are mentally health and drug addicted. So that's a good savings there. And then when we talk about kinship care, our numbers are going up daily for the kids that we have in our care, and we're paying astronomical dollars for the foster care program. And if you could show us some data that this is going to reduce the cost greatly in moving kids, which data shows are better off with their families, and moving into a kinship care. So even though we may be spending $7.5 or $11 million toward new initiatives, those new initiatives will actually help us in savings in the long run.
There will be a savings from the kinship care program in the way of board and care costs.
Thank you.
Ms. Baker.
Thank you. You know, in Councilman Schron's proposal, I think that if we were to separate the two ballot issues, I think that would send a pretty strong message to our constituent base that is voting, that we are being honest with you. We are saying that a renewal is absolutely necessary with an increase because of the appraisals, but also we are also in need of services beyond that, and that if they are generous in what they feel is needed, it gives them that choice. But we're telling them up front that a renewal levy may not, for all the services that we want to provide, be enough. And if you want to add more to that, we're giving you that opportunity. I think it's a strong message that we are providing an honest statement so that people can choose as to whether or not they can support both. And supporting both, again, means a significant increase that we're asking them to pay for. It's not a small increase. It's not twice. It's actually 3 times the amount that a renewal would be. And that's a lot to ask. I think if we were more upfront about that, we may actually have a better chance of getting both passed, and especially at least one. And I would ask that we at least consider that.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
It really sounds good, you know. The thing is I really think that we're the ones who have been elected to make this decision. And I think that while it may not be your intention, you're really asking somebody else to make the decision. If we, after all the time we've spent in this council, can't make a decision about what we want to put in front of the voters, after all, they don't have to vote for it, then I don't know that that's really, I believe that that's our job, that it's a representative democracy. We make those decisions. We're elected to make those decisions, not to ask the voters to have a menu of decisions that they can choose from. We should tell them what we think is best. If we don't think it's best, we shouldn't do it. But if we do think it's best, we shouldn't offer them an alternative that we don't think is as good.
Ms. Conwell.
And I just, through the chair, I'd just like to say that how many months have we been working on talking about the HHS levy? I know nothing final had occurred from the administrative side in terms of it, but on county council side, we have been having these conversations for well over 2 to 3 months. 6. Okay. So maybe I've only been in 2 to 3 months. So, you know, although we are, your colleagues would love to entertain, you know, suggestions at the last moment that our staff have put a lot of work in, may I ask why these ideas, new ideas, were not mentioned, or were they mentioned? Because I wasn't aware of them.
Councilman Sean.
This is not a new idea. It's the same information, just asking the voters, would they support it in a bifurcated manner? What is new about the concept of a replacement? Nothing. What is new about the concept of, do you want to support all these brand-new programs that have been added? It's just asking them to make a choice on this one and on this one.
I know, but did you bring that up to staff to look in that, to look
I brought up to staff last week, yes.
okay.
You can check. You can check on that. I brought up to staff and asked, is it appropriate? Can it be done? Has it been done? And I also brought up to staff that this is the first time, and they did the research on it, this is the first time that we've ever, in this new government, and we always try to cloak this being different than what took place the 10 years before us. So let's not differentiate the honesty and integrity that this body brings to it any differently when we do those arguments than we're doing this one. So we're bringing forth an opportunity to say, okay, we've never asked for a replacement and an increase in a partisan primary in the fall, or in the spring. The reason you bring an issue in the spring is so you can still have the opportunity in a general election. I get it. I understand. I spent 12 years on a school board, so I understand it perfectly. We had school board issues that sometimes failed, and so you do understand that. So I'm not objecting to that concept that we're doing this. I'm merely suggesting is let the voters decide, do you want to have these brand new programs to go into place? And I think that if we actually ask ourselves internally, if you could only get a passage of a replacement, or you did not get a success and you have to then go in the fall, would you rather have the replacement? And I think that we'd all say I would prefer the replacement than to have to worry about a renewal in the fall.
Ms. Simon.
I still am uncertain of my support of 0252 with regard to the 3.9 and increase. And if we don't, I'm trying to get clarity if this is 0252 is not passed out of committee today and under suspension under second reading at the full council today, isn't there another opportunity to have this in committee before the next full council meeting?
Yes, I can answer that question.
Okay.
The sequential approach is the easiest way to do it, but it has been done the other way. And the other way would be that we could pass both resolutions on December 10th at the last council meeting. What it would require is that we would do them sequentially at the council meeting. We would first pass 0252, and then the fiscal officer would have to be present and would have to have the numbers calculated and ready to go, and would immediately certify what the total amount that would be raised by the levy. And then those numbers would be inserted into Resolution 0253, and then that resolution would be subsequently passed at the same council meeting. So it can be done that way, and it has been done in the past, but it's easier to first declare the necessity and then pass the resolution to go on the ballot at the following meeting.
I appreciate that.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that detailed explanation, Ms. Simon. Would there also be a possibility that you could keep your sequential and do the reading on the 10th and have a special meeting somewhere between the 10th and the 18th? And the answer, I hope, would be yes, that we could do one and then have a special meeting just to pass the putting it on the ballot as a single item.
Yes, that theoretically is possible.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's over here. I've just got a question that's kind of confusing in my mind. You end up with two items on the ballot, as you're suggesting, one replacement and one increase. What if the increase is approved but the replacement is not?
What if the entire issue fails?
You're in the same boat.
No, you're not. One's passed, and you could still go forward in the fall.
You don't have anything to increase if the replacement's not approved.
Pardon?
You wouldn't have anything to increase if the replacement isn't approved by the voters.
You could still go in the fall with a
You'd have to go
renewal.
back.
Yeah, go back in the renewal, yes.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to do, if it fails, if they're joined together and it fails, you're going to have to go back in the fall anyway, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Baker.
Just for clarification, if we were to pass today the resolution for the treasurer, that language cannot change. So we are then, for the most part, an up or down vote for the replacement plus increase. Am I right on that?
Not entirely. However, if we were to pass the resolution of necessity and then we were to decide on December 10th to pursue a different course of action, we would have to do what I had described as the alternative. We would have to have an entirely new resolution of necessity, pass it on first reading, suspension at the council meeting, have the fiscal officer ready with the numbers to incorporate those numbers into the second resolution of whatever we had decided to do. So it theoretically could be done.
If we were to opt to go with a replacement only, and thinking that perhaps in 2024, we can then ask, given that we have proven ourselves with the dollars that the taxpayers gave us, would that also take another resolution for a lesser amount of money to be done?
If we were to go with just a renewal and replacement, we would have to either devise new resolutions of necessity and the resolution to put it on the ballot, or else we would have to amend these two resolutions that we have in front of us to change them from what they state now to what you're suggesting. Councilman Shan.
Mr. Chairman, based on your comments, I do have all four of those resolutions prepared, and I'll submit those to everybody so they can at least read them in advance.
Okay. Any further discussion? Yes.
Mr. Chair, I want to be clear, I'm not prepared to vote on the first one today out of committee, so, I'm just want to let you know.
Okay.
And I'll support Ms. Simon on her point position.
Okay.
I'm not prepared either to vote today.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't doing my due diligence.
The question now is whether there's any motion that anyone would like to offer regarding action today.
Well, I believe that we should act today. I believe that frankly, what we're doing is dragging our feet.
Excuse me, Mr. Brady, your mic isn't on.
I believe we should act today. I believe that really what happens, I've been in the opposition. I lived in the opposition for 10 years. In the opposition, generally what you do is drag your feet. And I think that's what's going on here, is an attempt to just drag this process out. So if the council's not ready to move forward, well, of course, we're not ready to move forward. But I'm certainly ready to move forward after months and months of this, and I believe hesitation on our part is not really helpful to the levy.
And would you like to make a motion?
I want to hear what the rest of the council has to say.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm not doing this for purposes of delay. I really need to consider, and I ask for information, and I will be happy to be present and available at the next meeting to participate in this. But right now, I did ask for additional info, but it's certainly not for purposes of delay. I'll be available to
Councilman
consider
Gallagher.
this at the next meeting.
This is the same language. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, somebody. But this language is generic. It's the same language we would use no matter what we did. So why are we arguing over whether to just move this part of it forward? We're not even debating about how high a levy would be or what the levy would be used for or anything else. This is just a procedural motion, Councilwoman. I don't understand why that's necessary.
Okay, maybe I misunderstand, but I think we're getting locked in.
Maybe you do, because I want to make sure that
No,
you
we're
don't.
being locked into an amount of an increase.
To an amount. This first resolution, 52 doesn't lock us into the amount, does it, Mr. Chairman? Isn't it 53 that locks us into an amount?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Council President.
Because that was not my intention.
As I read resolution even 0252 does declare the intention of doing a replacement plus an increase of 0.8 mils. So this.
But it's not. But okay. So I'm wrong about that. But there would have. But the second resolution would have to be passed in order for the first resolution to have any meaning.
That's correct.
Okay. It's the same thing as far as I'm concerned, although I stand corrected.
So, Mr. Chair, to the President, that would be something I wanted to look to see about the actual increase amount, the $165 per month per household. Is that the appropriate place? Should it be less than that? I don't know. It's the amount that's being locked in that I needed to take a second look at.
Councilman Gallagher.
Listening to the debate, which has been very good. I'm not for bifurcating this. I've never really run away from the electorate. When at all possible, we make a decision, we can live with it. But this is something that goes to the electorate. My preference would be to move both these forward. I don't know at this point I could support them. The proposed allocation, and I take that as proposed, has some serious problems with me, and I think might even torpedo the end result if the electorate gets a hold of this. We all know the problems that we have here in the county. We got big problems. We have health and human services that are lacking in many areas, and to expand into new areas, I think is a danger. I think it's wrong. I think we need to sharpen our pencils on the proposed allocation to make this an easier sell to the public. And that's what I would hope that we could do in a very short period of time, Mr. Chairman. But I just don't support putting two on the ballot. It's difficult with one, and if the people don't like it, they're not going to vote for it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
you're over here.
Yes.
May I make a comment?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I just wanted to rise and indicate my very strong support for this levy increase and the necessity that we adopt this. And I want to comment that the creative proposal by Councilman Schron, I think, is a false dichotomy, because when you look at the total, over the 8 years, this levy will generate approximately $280 million. When you look at, even taking out the supposed new projects, there's more than $280 million of needs stated just to continue what we've been doing. So, you know, your vote to put this on the ballot or the public's vote to support this doesn't mean we're doing new projects. That still has to come before the council, and you will have the opportunity to vote yes or no, as you do on everything. We don't have enough money in this levy to do all the things that we want to do, that we need to do. And we have committed, I personally have committed, and I know the president has committed, that we will not be coming for another levy increase for 8 years. So we're stuck at the $280 million over the 8 years. And when you look at the numbers, there's not $280 million here. It can be much higher than that, depending on how you examine the numbers. You might ask, then, why didn't you go for a higher levy? And the answer is what Councilwoman Baker talked about, which is you have to make a decision what you think you can pay us. And while Councilman Miller had crunch numbers that were much higher than what we're seeking, the fact is that we made a decision that this is the best we can do in terms of public support. So I urge you to support this. I've heard the council members talk in other contexts about life and death decisions. This is a life and death decision. We can't not support the kids that are in custody. We can't leave them out on the street. We can't not support seniors that would otherwise be in institutions. We can't not provide health care in the jail for people. We can't do the things that are on this list. We can't forget or omit doing the things that are on this list. So it's an 8-year levy, and I urge your support. Thank you very much.
Questions or comments? Councilman Tuma.
Thank you. So as Councilman Gallagher alluded to, I mean, I think the debate on this has been very healthy. But having said that, to bifurcate this and put two issues on the ballot, I just don't think is in the best interest of the citizens of Cuyahoga County. I mean, if you look back and you look at our even a recent history, we had a very healthy debate on the sheriff, whether to make the sheriff an elected position. Had we gone forward and put, whether or not to make changes to the office and also to make that an elected position, I'm not exactly sure what type of confusion that would have created, and I think you'll have a similar type of confusion here. And with all due respect to my colleagues, and I know we're looking for alternatives and such, But I just don't think that is the way to go on something like this. Like my colleagues, Council President and Mr. Gallagher stated, I think the citizens of Cuyahoga County, we owe it to them to come up with a decision. We're the ones who are looking at the numbers and crunching the numbers and trying to come up with something here. And I think we've been looking at this stuff long enough to know that what we're trying to do here is in the best interest of the people here. And as far as the allocation, that seems to be what much of the issue is about here, the allocation, how these funds are going to be allocated. I just remind my colleagues that, ultimately, any funding that's going to come through this levy is going to have to be approved by us when it goes out. And if there's something on here that we disagree with wholeheartedly or we don't think is necessary, by all means, we speak up, and that's what we've done since I've been on council here. So I really don't see that being, an issue in practicality. We've seen in the past the administration come up with ideas that they think is great in theory, and we say in practice it just doesn't work. And they understand that. And I think in this instance, we have to look back. We have to see when this levy was first placed on the ballot X number of years ago, what was the opioid crisis like in Cuyahoga County? It is at an all-time high, and if no pun intended there. If we look towards settlement funds as the only way of handling that, that's not going to cut it. We've been told that that's not going to be enough to help with remedying this issue and being proactive about this issue. So that's one area that I look to. Another areas I'd ask is, how many kids were in county custody X number of years ago when this first levy was placed on the ballot? And it seems like now it's at a very high amount, and those kids are our responsibility. We also look at mental health issues. X number of years ago when this levy was placed on the ballot, we looked at mental health care a little bit differently. A lot of people weren't coming out and saying that they have issues, whereas now it's become an area where I think people are starting to say, hey, this is something that just can't remain behind closed doors, and that's an area that we have to address. And, as the council president alluded to, we are living in as part of our community, a major city that has major issues, and it's our responsibility to address those issues. And I think that the amounts that we're asking for the time that we're asking, again, we're talking about 8 years where we don't have to keep going back to the citizens and keep asking for increases. I think it's our responsibility to move forward with this legislation as it is and lay it out there for the people to make a decision on.
Thank you. Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair, I just want to state for the record, I'm not in favor of two separate ballot initiatives. One, Mr. Chairman, you stated that would entail that we would actually have to come back for an extra special meeting.
Not necessarily.
Not
It could all
necessarily.
be done on December 10th.
It could all be, okay. Because I just want to have my colleagues keep in mind that December 10th is kind of what we were told at the beginning of the year, and, people have made plans and things of that nature, things and obligations they can't get out of if we don't come up with a solution.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I thought we're meeting on the 10th.
We
As a
are meeting
council.
on the 10th.
So-
The concern is about meetings that would be later
Oh,
than the
no,
10th.
I don't, no, I'm talking about the 10th, and I don't agree with two separate ballot initiatives.
Ms. Baker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hearing the debate and certainly understand it all. I would ask that at least we consider understanding the environment that we're in right now, that, the trust in our government right now is not at an all-time high. And can't we consider a replacement levy? And then in 2024, after we've proven ourselves, we've had a chance to show that we have spent our money wisely, that people are getting the services they need, that many of the challenges that are facing us now for the next couple of years, we've worked through. And at that time, we earned the credibility and the respect of the people to give us an increase in the 2024. Is there any thought to understanding where we're at right now in asking for not only a replacement levy that has an increase built in because of the appraisals, but then asking an additional twice as much for the increase of the 0.8 mils. I mean, $41.58 for a $100,000 home, and many in our district have $200,000 homes or $150,000 homes, and those are middle-class people. They are not wealthy, I can afford it, this doesn't mean anything to me. These are middle-class people that it will hurt. It will make an impact. That's a lot. For them to pay on a $200,000 house, it would be over $400 a year. That's right now, for that, right now it's about $220 or $244. That's a big jump that we're asking people to be able to afford. And like I said, we're not in the best environment to be asking. So I would at least have you consider a replacement levy with an increase, and then ask again in 2024 when we've had a chance to perhaps show that we are at a place where we've shown what we can do with the dollars that were given to us.
Any further discussion, Ms. Conwell?
Through the chair to my colleague, I don't understand this. I do, in a way, don't understand how we can prove ourselves. We're dealing with individuals that could, by 2024, there could be stuff worse, or things could be improved, because we're not dealing with a segment of certain individuals that are going to prove ourselves. We're going to deal with a lot of human beings, and people make mistakes and do all kind of things. So I don't think any of us have a crystal ball to say that is going to flow out, because you've mentioned that, respectfully, you've mentioned that we need to prove ourselves. Based on that human nature thing, I don't think that waiting 2024, because we don't even know if some of us may or may not be here. Our concern is what's put in front of us is helping the well-being of the people that are in need today, and trying to make a concerted effort for plans for the future, near future, for those that will need our assistance, may or may need our assistance. I'm sure there'll be more people added to the rolls. But the reason that I am so proud of this piece of legislation that has two key components, I feel, that will have us a significant cost savings, which would be the diversion, not having people in the jails, making it a sin for crime because you're diseased in a way. And then the other is the increasing numbers. I mean, you stepped off of HHS committee, but the numbers are increasing, for the kids that are in our care. Yes, some of that is partly drug-related, and we're going to try to offset that with some of the opiate funding, but still the numbers are too high. And we're, in constant conversations that those numbers can double. Those numbers double. I don't know what we're going to do. There's not enough affluent or inner city people that are opening their doors to take these children in that we're mandated for. So I think this is a good initiative that we've worked on to try to push for. Let's open up and knock down the barriers and open up doors for family members to take in some of these children. I know downstate, Director Cotw has pushed. It used to be 10 years if you had a felony, you could not take in one of your family members because, it was 10 years. But they've fought and got that down to 5. So there's a lot of people working on these issues, and the savings. Can Director just quote what we pay for foster care and just quote what we pay for kinship?
In 2018, we spent $52 million on board and care. Those were my last numbers. And we provided a minuscule number of kinship through the state of Ohio, probably about $1.2 million.
So I just like to bring those facts that I deal with almost on an everyday basis, getting the numbers. Like Mike gets the numbers of how many are in jail. I get the numbers of how many kids that we have in care. And both of them are like off the chain. So that's why I think these two initiatives that are put forward are going to help us also at a time that the opiate funds are coming. We spend all the opiate funds and don't add to it, we're not really combating the problem. So I just want to yield and always share my wealth of knowledge.
The council president has suggested an interest in learning how council members feel about this. My feeling is that the first resolution, number 2019-0252, is preliminary in nature. It expresses an intent, it expresses directionality, but it does not close off any options. We still remain all of our options for the following council meeting. So I believe that moving forward is the right step, and that if we were to pass the first resolution today, it would be a good thing. Any other comments?
If there are no other comments, I'd like to move Resolution 2019-0252.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to refer Resolution 2019-0252 to the full council. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, I'll be supporting the belief of Ms. Simon on this vote, and I will ask that there also is no requirement to pass this today either, even though you said you like it in sequence. So I'll be voting to not vote for it and keep it in your sequence.
Chairman, just because I know it was stated earlier, but it's our council's opinion that 8 votes are needed to move this. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. I would presume that those 8 votes would be required in the final vote out of the council at the council meeting, and probably not at this committee meeting. But that's kind of not relevant, because if we don't get 8 votes tonight, there's no reason to pass it to this afternoon with 6. But that's what I think.
Okay. Just want members to be aware.
Okay. I have one further comment, which is about the idea that the proposed $35 million increase is almost a 35% increase, and while that's technically correct if you refer it just to the one levy that we're talking about here, we have a human services system of 2 levies that are for the same thing, and they're only separated so that we don't have all our eggs in one basket. And I do think it is much more appropriate to think of this in terms of how much of an increase it is for the total Health and Human Services levy fund, which is about 15%. Any other discussion? Hearing none?
Mr.
Yes.
Chair, I don't know at the end of the day if I'm going to support this ultimately to put on the ballot at this amount, but to get it out of committee, I'll support the president on that.
Okay, great, thank you. Ms. Schmatzer.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may clarify, is the motion with a recommendation for consideration for second reading adoption under suspension of rules at this evening's regular council meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
The clerk will call the roll on the motion to move Resolution 2019-0252 to the full council with recommendation for passage under second reading suspension.
Mr. Schron? No. Ms. Conwell?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Simon? Ms. Baker?
No.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Tuma? Mr. Gallagher? Council President Brady?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. The resolution is so referred. If there is no objection, we're going to hold Resolution 2019-0253 in committee for further discussion. And at this point, I'm going to turn over the meeting to the council president to take us into executive session on the collective bargaining.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have what I believe will be a rather brief meeting, which is good because it's only 30 minutes before the regular council meeting time. As always, all meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio open meeting laws. Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, the council will go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining matters. During this time, our live stream will be down, and we ask all those not needed for the executive session to remain in council chambers. Council members will convene in the adjacent committee room A, will re-enter the meeting once the executive session is ended. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing collective bargaining matters?
Second.
Moved in second. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Schron? Ms. Conwell?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Brown? Ms. Stevens? Ms. Simon? Ms. Baker? Mr. Miller? Mr. Tuma?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Council President Brady?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are reconvening the committee of the whole and are now back on the record. Is there any miscellaneous business before the council today? Hearing none, we are adjourned until 5 o'clock in the regular meeting.